Rejection sensitive dysphoria, symptom test for ADHD brains. I am Jason Serro. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I created the video 3 ways to manage rejection sensitive dysphoria. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I have that video and a couple more on RSD, and we're going to go through the checklist. We're going to see if you've got RSD, if you have some symptoms that might ring true to you, and if so, we'll kind of just go through it and see what actually applies to you or not. Now, a lot of these symptoms can overlap with other conditions. I'm not going to do that today. I'm not going to go over the other conditions really. I'll do that in other videos, but this is like a good starting off point. Well, actually, my other video was a good starting point. I would go back and see that again, or if you haven't seen it, again, it's 3 ways to manage rejection sensitive dysphoria. So rejection sensitive dysphoria, or the extreme emotional pain linked to feelings of rejection and shame, commonly affects children and adults with ADHD. In my belief, it's not just an ADHD condition that, like if you have ADHD, it's not just ADHD that people feel rejection sensitivity, but you are more likely to have rejection sensitivity if you do have ADHD. So we're going to use this self-test as a driver to kind of see like where you fall on this. All right, so I'm going to go through all of the criteria and we'll see what happens here. So the questionnaire is on attitudemag.org. It's a great website. It's got a lot of great resources. I go to it all the time. It's got William Dotson, the physician who coined this term, and it's a good website to go to get information on symptoms. You can do a lot of self-tests. There's a lot of articles, and it's just a great site. So I do advise you to go to that site. It's attitudemag.org. So the first question would be, do you experience sudden intense bouts of rage when your feelings are hurt? So do you scream, do you yell, do you break things? Essentially, do you have an overflow of emotion? We have 5 options here to answer, so all of them have 5 options. It's very often, sometimes, rarely, and never. So anything that I go through, just kind of write down what your answer would be of the 5. So again, do you experience sudden, intense bouts of rage when your feelings are hurt? Do you scream, do you yell, do you break things? Do you have essentially this overflow of emotion, which we would call emotional dysregulation? Second question, are you your own harshest critic? So, do you have what we would call a strong inner critic? And that voice in our head that would say something like, you're a nobody, everyone hates you, you suck at life, is essentially what this critic wants you to believe about yourself. It's really negative, really hard and harsh. Question number 3, do you consider yourself a people pleaser, going above and beyond to get on someone's good side? So essentially, you compromise your own wants and needs to provide something for someone else, because if you do, they will be happy with you and you will be accepted by them. So again, do you consider yourself a people pleaser, going above and beyond to get on someone's good side? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Next question, do you pass up opportunities or avoid starting projects because you're afraid you'll fail? Essentially, I can't fail if I don't try, and you probably have low frustration tolerance if you say often and very often to this question. The next question, have you been called overly sensitive or a head case because of your strong emotional reactions? Your emotional reactions seem to irritate people. People will let you know that you are acting out. Most people can hide their emotions in public, so it becomes an expectation to control your outbursts. People expect you to take it on the chin and power through it. So they will call you sensitive. They will say, boy, you just can't control yourself. You're just too sensitive. All right, next question. Do you dedicate more time than is necessary to a project or become perfectionistic to make sure your work has no mistakes? You hyper-focus on small things to make things right. So I do have a video on perfectionism. Check it out. I'll put it in the description. Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. So again, the question is, do you dedicate more time than is necessary to a project or become perfectionistic to make sure your work has no mistakes? Have you ever experienced your emotions as a physical sensation, as though you've been punched in the chest or physically wounded? It feels, so people would describe it like it's a blow to the head, a brain freeze. It's similar to like how a brain freeze would be, maybe a numbness, maybe a dizziness. It could feel like a blow to the heart. It's painful, and it feels like an actual physical wound. So very often, sometimes, seldom, and never. Next question. Do you feel shame about the lack of control you have over your emotions? So shame is not the same as guilt. Shame is a negative sense of who you are as a person, how you feel about yourself, your self-esteem, and your identity. Guilt is usually a reaction to having behaved in a way that contradicts your beliefs. So again, the question is, do you feel shame about the lack of control you have over your emotions? You would typically get really pissed off with yourself about how things really bother you and you cannot control it. Next question. Before you were diagnosed with ADHD, were you told you might have a mood disorder? Let's try to be clear here. A mood disorder is basically bipolar disorder. So that questionnaire of a mood disorder starts with, have you ever had a period of time when you were not your usual self? That is the mood disorder. That is the bipolar disorder first question on that questionnaire. So, but you would have been told you had some sort of mood disorder like that. Now those are linked. ADHD and bipolar have some links in there, and that's complicated, but they are in a similar family together. I'll get to that in another. There's a video for everything, right? I'll get to that at some point. But again, so this would be before you were diagnosed with ADHD. Were you told you might have a mood disorder? Very often, sometimes, rarely, and never. Next question. Do you shy away from close friendships or romantic relationships because you worry that if people know the real you, they won't like you? You worry you're too much for someone. They can't handle you, and they will ultimately leave when they discover the real you. So again, do you shy away from close relationships or romantic relationships because you worry that if people know the real you, they won't like you? I also have a video on that. RSD and relationships and rumination. Check it out. I'll put that one in the description. I have a playlist of all the RSD videos. So I want to take this time again to introduce myself to people who don't know who I am. I am Jason Serro. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I also do coaching in addition to counseling. They're two different things, but they merge wonderfully. I'm able to do therapy with people in Connecticut who come into my office, and it's more clinical, but my coaching is not as clinical. It's great because you don't have to have any diagnosis if you don't want. It's a whole different thing, and I can see anybody across the country and even out of the country. So I do that with people all across the country. If you want to do some coaching with me, you can email me at jasonserrotalks at gmail.com. jasonserrotalks@gmail.com. So the next question is, do you assume the worst in commonplace interactions, worrying you will be fired every time your boss calls you into her office or his office. So this is more of an anxiety question, or anxiety symptom. So you catastrophize, and you have what I call anticipatory anxiety. You probably think the worst about a pretty benign situation that might happen. So someone calls you down, or calls you to some sort of attention, and you just immediately think the worst. You catastrophize. That's part. So again, part of the RSD condition. Very often, sometimes, rarely, and never. Last two questions. Do you think that you cannot go on feeling this way? You might feel hopeless, helpless, like you really can't help yourself. So you can't get out of your own way, you can't even help yourself, depressed, and you might even feel like you're suffering. It could be that extreme. So again, very often, sometimes, rarely, and never. Do you think that you cannot go on feeling this way? Last question. Do you avoid meeting new people or trying new things because your fear of rejection and criticism is so strong? So this is where you fear that you won't be accepted, and you worry about being judged. You probably hyper-focus on being judged and criticized, and think a lot about that. So this, if you go on attitudemag.org, they have where you could fill out in the bubbles. You can click on all these answers. And if you put your email in there, they'll send you the results. So I don't have any like numbers or whatever. I don't have any results for you. So you can figure that out. But if you answered often and very often to a lot of these, reach out to me, and we could do some one-on-one work, and I can get you a personalized plan. And it doesn't take very long to come up with the solutions on how to deal with this. Now, if you have more complicated issues going on, if you have PTSD and some other more serious conditions going on, then I can actually help you and point you in the right direction with that, and that can be factored into your plan. But if you'd like, email me at jasonserotalks.com and at gmail.com, and we can set up a coaching hour. Okay, so that's about it. Make sure you connect with those other videos, and I will continue to have RSD videos for you. I'll pump out as many as I can in between my sessions. That's when I do my videos. All right, so thanks for watching.